on the 23rd of June 2016. At some point, 33 million people hit the ballot box to cast their vote. We waited with bated breath long into the night before a woman with a serious face and, frankly, scary glasses announced to a packed Manchester town hall, and yes, I was there, that the UK had voted to leave the EU. It wasn't, of course, one-sided. Scotland backed Remain, Wales wanted to leave, Northern Ireland preferred to stay, and England wanted out. But overall, 51.9% of Brits voted to leave, 48.1% voted to remain. The turnout was 72.2%. History was made. The Prime Minister had to resign. Nigel Farage took the unusual step of having a pint, and Jean-Claude Juncker looked as if someone had just killed his dog. Was that the end of the matter? Not for a moment.
Now, naturally, people want to know what Brexit will mean.
Brexit means Brexit.
Our goal remains the same. We want to agree a deal that works in the best interests of both the European Union and the United Kingdom, and people and businesses right across Europe.
Well, it's a negotiation, but we've got off to the worst possible starts because the Prime Minister called an election that she didn't need to call. It's not clear what her mandate is, and she's lost authority abroad. Now, all of us want these talks to succeed because we do need a good deal for Britain that's going to last for generations.
And the arguments began. Now, if you were the philosopher's favourite alien arriving on planet Earth for the first time, you'd have thought the people of the UK had gone stark raving mad. This was the dictionary definition of polarity. This took divided opinion into altogether new territory, with politicos and hacks, union leaders and humble voters all exercising their democratic right to shout a lot. However, from this confusing and cacophonous picture of claim and counterclaim came two men. Two men whose views perfectly encapsulate the Leave and the Remain positions. Politically, they couldn't be further apart, but are often matched in terms of raw passion and impressive intellect. We welcome the editor of politics.co.uk, Ian Dunt. Ian, good to see you, sir.
Hello, sir.
To say a passion, and I read your Twitter feed, and it's kind of almost off the scale in terms of a passionate Remainer. Would that be reasonable?
Yeah, that's reasonable. I have to say, I get far more het up about the ineptitude with which this is being pursued than the goal which they're trying to achieve. I mean, you could have brought people like me on side, in those early days, if you'd taken like a really broad approach to this thing, come up with a realistic timetable, come up with achievable goals. But they didn't. It was always this kind of really quite emotional, sort of inward-looking, intensely, ferociously, sort of borderline hysterical approach to the whole sort of thing. And because they're talking about the fate of my country and the quality of the life of the people in it, I take objection to that. So, yes, I get it with the Remain thing, but I'm far more concerned by the manner of what's going on than actually the destination.
OK. Also, Daniel Hannan is with us, Conservative MEP, author of What Next? How to Get the Best from Brexit. Daniel Hannan, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
You are live in the very place that this is all over, of course, Brussels, is that right?
No, I'm actually at home in Hampshire.
I knew, as I said it, I thought, classic schoolboy error from presenter. Point number one, never identify the location in case you've got it wrong. You're going to be spending more time there, of course, over the next few years, because, of course,
looking forward to doing that.
Just a year or so ago, you voted yourself out of a job, essentially.
Yeah, I will breathe a deep sigh of relief on the day that I'm released to go and do something more productive instead.
Let's just get a little idea then, first of all, Ian Dunt. I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit in that point there. Tell us, overall, why leaving the EU was such a terrible thing.
That's a very big question. Look, it's not really about the leaving of the EU. I would say, ultimately, Brexit is a time capacity problem. We've got nearly half a century's worth of laws that we have mingled together like vines on a wall. You look at the regulators, dozens and dozens of regulators, the way that our planes fly overhead, the way that our drugs are put on the market, the things we need to do for meat to be able to be sold overseas or even produced in a healthy way, in a safe way here. All of that is clogged up together. Now, if you want to disentangle that while creating a new trading arrangement between one of the most sophisticated economies in the world and one of the largest trading blocs in the world, you better set yourself enough time to do it. You better approach it in a competent and sensible way, and you better make sure that you have the negotiators. And when we talk about negotiators, it sounds really general. We're talking about trade specialists in areas like intellectual property, in areas like agricultural goods. These are guys who've done this their entire careers. You do not just get a civil servant and chuck them in a room with those guys, because they will get torn alive. And every time that they lose one of those debates, whether it's on tariffs, whether it's on regulation, those are British people's livelihoods that are affected by that. So all of this, again, is the manner and a realistic time frame. And for that alone, the fact that Brexiters have not really been able to be remotely convincing on either of those two issues, I would say is the best argument about the way this has been conducted.
Daniel Hannan, I mean, that all sounds like perfectly reasonable stuff, doesn't it?
Those are remediable problems. I mean, I think both sides in the talks have now accepted that there's going to have to be some kind of bridging arrangement, some sort of transition period. But the idea that you wouldn't start anything which is difficult, I think, would be an incredibly defeatist one. Most things that are worth doing, do involve some difficulty in getting there, and they are worth doing precisely because you look back and you think, thank heavens we did that. And, 5-10 years from now, when we have our own laws again, when we can hire and fire the people who passed them, when we're part of global trading networks, I think we're going to look back and the only question we're going to ask is why it took us so long.
But isn't Ian Dunt's point reasonable? This is perhaps about the ineptitude of the process as distinct from the overarching result.
I'm not any kind of defender of Sir Humphrey and the UK civil service, but I think Ian is doing them a disservice. I think we've actually got very competent people there. And yeah, of course it can't be done overnight. I mean, during the referendum campaign, I made exactly the argument that Ian has just made about how the EU wasn't just a treaty arrangement. It's completely intertwined with our domestic laws. That, in a way, was the problem, that it had so much power over how we ran our affairs internally. So, yeah, it's unrealistic to say all of that is going to end at, midnight on the 1st of February or whatever. There's going to have to be some kind of interim arrangement. But, that's not an argument for not doing something worthwhile.
So it's not really the civil service. The civil service are kind of doing what they can. Basically, the task of a civil servant is provide a solution. You have a politician that goes, I want to do X. The civil servant goes, well, you go, look, you've got options A, B, and C, and these will pretty much get you where you need to be. And they've been trying to do it. I mean, you look at the position papers, and most of the time you can see these poor guys hidden away in Whitehall go, okay, look, I mean, I think maybe you could try and wrangle it with a customs union this way. The trouble is, they're not being given any coherent, concise political goals to aim for. What we've had, and they have had a long time now. Look, they had all of the referendum campaign to put forward a programme for how they do this. They've had, 13, 15 months since the result in order to come up with some kind of idea of what they're trying to achieve. And instead what we've had from the government and from leading Brexiters is just guys going, I want all the trade, but I want none of the responsibilities. I want all of the good bits of the EU, but I don't want to take any of the rules. And after a while, that kind of infantile, fundamentally emotional approach starts to grate. So again, it's really not the civil servants, it's the politicians. And the politicians are mostly responding to the tabloid press, to the Tory backbenchers, to UKIP campaigners who've prodded them into this rather hysterical position.
Daniel Hannan, do you recognise that as the picture that that's unravelling at the moment?
I really don't. The Prime Minister set out in a speech at Lancaster House what the objectives were. It was then followed up with a white paper. There have been 2 parliamentary debates, and now we've started producing these sectoral position papers on, what do you do about the customs arrangements? What do you do about the Irish border? What do you do about mutual recognition of products that are already on the market? This kind of stuff. And actually, I think if you look at what the two sides have said on the record, if you look at the stated position of the EU and the stated position of the UK, rather than looking at some of the headlines of excitable people giving off-the-record briefings, you find that there's quite a lot of convergence. I would say that on most issues, like avoiding a border in Ireland, like having a continuation of free trade, like recognising the rights of EU nationals who have already settled here and Brits in Europe, the two sides are saying the same thing. Sure, there's going to be an argument about the money. Of course there is. And there'll be arguments about, which agricultural products are allowed and so on. But on the big thrust of wanting a close, friendly, cooperative arrangement where we have not just free trade, but intelligence and security links, policing links, where we retain some of the links we currently have on educational exchanges and culture and, research and so on, I think you'll find that the two sides are really very close.
So let's look at the position papers that you mentioned. They put one out the other day on the customs union. Now, the British position is they want all the advantages of a customs union, but they don't want to be in the customs union because that means we can't come up with our own trade deals. Now, Liam Fox has somehow managed to work his way back into government. Former disgraced minister Liam Fox has managed to work his way back in there, and it's very important to him that he gets to go around the world signing these trade deals. Although I'm unconvinced, given the level of competency he has shown us so far, that he'd be able to do a very good job in getting those trade deals, or in getting particularly advantageous terms. Now, the basis of that then means we have to create a new customs arrangement. What a customs union is it basically means that you have the same taxes on goods coming into and out of a certain area. We have that for all of Europe right now. So if the good comes in Spain, or if it comes in Britain, pays the same amount of tax. We want to separate from that, but we don't want any of those taxes when we start sending things over to Europe, because about half of our exports go to Europe. That would absolutely cripple really, quite low and medium income people in Britain. People that work in manufacturing, people that work in agriculture. Those are the main victims of this kind of thing. So the British position paper on the customs union, A, has two ideas. One of them barely even worth speaking about. The other is this idea of customs sort of partnership, really, where we form one line of a customs. I know this sounds boring, but basically plenty of people's livelihoods are at stake in this. We form a line of customs barrier. I'm not making this up. It sounds like sci-fi, but this is actually true. Every single good that comes into the UK would then be tracked to see where it ends up. Every banana, every chair, every cigarette, every book would have some kind of imaginary tracking device. This is government policy, British government policy. So that if it ended up in Spain, if it ended up in Poland, if it ended up in Romania, we would somehow know and be able to charge it a tax on that basis. There is no administration in the world, and there is no technology in the world, which would allow us to do that as it has been described. That is the official position that's in the British Customs Union paper. I had dinner the other day with some of our trade negotiators. They were literally laughing at us. I mean, these are hard-nosed guys. They go out, they do these deals. They're laughing in our faces because we are putting out this abject Fantasyland Mickey Mouse nonsense. Now, if that is the great plan for Brexit, then we should be very, very concerned indeed.
We will get Daniel Hannan's response as to how you can track a banana around Europe in just a couple of moments. I'd be intrigued to find out what that is. But, of course, importantly, with these kind of debates, we want your questions to 0345 6060 973. If you want to put a question to either the, dare I say, arch Remainer. Are you happy with Arch, Ian Dunt?
Oh, no, it sounds rather theatrical.
It does a bit, doesn't it? Arch Remainer, Ian Dunt, Arch Leaver, Daniel Hannan, MEP. We're debating all aspects of this here today. On the day that Jean-Claude Juncker said that the UK will soon regret leaving the EU, we'll examine those words with our two guests in a second. But importantly, your calls, comments on any aspect of this or specific points you'd like to put to either of our guests. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to Late Nights with Ian Collins, LBC.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
A massive fatberg of food waste and sanitary products weighing 130 tonnes is more than double the length of Wembley's pitch. Alex Sanders is Waste Network Manager for Thames Water.
What makes up a fatberg? Well, it's fats, oils, greases mixed in with all those sanitary products from tampons and mainly wet wipes. And then this is the nasty bit. We've got to send the chaps down. It's a cramped sewer, so they can't stand up. It's not that big. And they're having to manually lug it out.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With Hampton by Hilton. Book direct for the lowest price.
Every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
No one wants to be in the red, in debt, or facing mortgage arrears. The only red should be what's in your glass, toasting a fresh new start. Thanks to Property Rescue, you can. They could buy your home for cash and pay your legal fees. You could even exchange within 48 hours and have money in the bank if you opt for their cash advance. Get that just sold feeling with Property Rescue. Fast forward to cash in the bank at propertyrescue.co.uk.
Here are the swallows, gathering to make the journey to Africa and glorious sunshine. And here's the Jones family, gathering at number 37, about to go into hibernation. Let's hope their boiler's in good shape, or it could be a miserable winter.
At Swale Heating, our expert engineers can install an A-rated Worcester Bosch boiler, which comes with a warranty of up to 10 years and a year's free cover for the whole central heating system, subject to survey. For a quote, visit swaleheating.com. Rely on us to keep you warm.
Are you confused about PPI? At PPI Hotline, we want to give you the facts. There is absolutely every reason to check you had PPI. Even if you think you never have, we can help you find out, as you could be owed thousands. And now there's a deadline. We just need the name of the bank you've had loans or credit cards with, and we'll check for free. So find out now if you're owed by texting WIN to 82222.
PPI Hotline. Text WIN to 82222.
A perfect journey has no interruptions. Take the quickest route with navigation and real-time traffic information in the Volvo V40R design. A perfect journey sounds different every time. Listen to your favorite music via internet radio. And of course, a perfect journey needs a perfect finale. Park easily with rear park assist. With monthly rentals of £239, the Volvo V40 T2R design NAV Plus has everything you need to make your journey perfect.
4-year personal contract hire agreement with 48 monthly rentals of £239 with Volvo Car Leasing. Offer in September 30th, subject to status. Mileage and return conditions apply. Visit volvocars.co.uk for more details.
Take a test drive today at your local Volvo showroom. Volvo, human-made.
Air Canada's having its 80th birthday. And what better way to celebrate than with a birthday sale? Right now, take advantage of savings to amazing destinations throughout North America. There's no better time to plan your next adventure. But hurry, book by September 26 for travel on select dates. Visit aircanada.com or call your travel agent.
Summer is coming to an end. Never mind, you can look forward to enjoying more time in your brand new Mobalpa kitchen. Whether you're happiest entertaining friends or cooking up a warming treat for your family, Mobalpa has a contemporary kitchen design for you. Now with free expert fitting for a limited time only. Find your nearest Mobalpa kitchen studio at mobalpa.co.uk. Minimum spend and exclusions apply.
This is LBC with Ian Collins.
Mitch in North London, and welcome back, by the way, 0345 6060 973. So I should say welcome to our guests, who, if you're not aware, Ian Dunt, editor of politics.co.uk. I mean, if you are looking for a kind of news outlet that in many respects, we were just talking about this during the break, everyone wants to find their place within the market, of course, but what you're doing there is you've really galvanised a place there, haven't you? And particularly on this issue, because of course you can glaze over talking about Brexit, and it's important that you don't want to patronise readers, but at the same time you also don't want to lose them either. So
yeah, exactly.
There's a bit of a delicate balance on this one,
right? I mean, if you're in any way emotionally normal, this stuff would bore you to tears. But the truth is, at the end of it, it is your life. Like, it's your life in a way that it simply isn't. Even when someone's talking about a war in some other country or tsunami somewhere, actually this stuff, when people talk about really boring things like tariff rate quotas, things that you instantly just want to slam your head in the car door, actually that is the content of your life. It's about how much money you're getting home. It's about the products that you buy, whether they're safe. It's about how well your country is doing and how much tax you have to pay, what your public services are like. This stuff genuinely affects everyone. It's just given very, very boring names, so they make it very easy for people to switch off and to not engage, not pay attention, and therefore not be part of the democratic process.
I mean, it's often said, Daniel Hannan, that the entire EU setup is almost designed so that nobody can quite work out how it works. Is there any truth in that? That no one part? It's almost like Oceania in that respect. No one knows which part is running another part, etc.
Well, it's like Oceania in the sense that it's out of control. I mean, it's run by people that you can't get rid of, who are appointed and who are undemocratic, and it was intended that way because they knew that if every successive transfer of power from the national capitals to Brussels had to be approved by the electorates, they'd never get away with it. And so, what they call the democratic deficit isn't an accident. It's a deliberate design. But I did want to come back, as the break interrupted, on the point about borders, which we were discussing just before. So I think this is really important, and the idea that you can't do it unless you track bananas and whatever else. I mean, this is not the 19th century where we have kind of mustachioed customs officers at border posts with peaked caps and epaulets, right? Almost all the paperwork since the 90s among developed economies is done in advance and online. Now, Ian was saying you cannot possibly have all this free trade with Europe while at the same time having your own customs regime, which would mean that you can sign your own free trade agreements with China or India or America. Actually, don't take my word for it. The countries in the European Free Trade Association are doing exactly that. So Norway, Switzerland, so on, they have free trade with the EU, but they are outside the customs union, which means that they do have their own trade agreements with China and Indonesia and Philippines and whatever, which the EU doesn't have. So this is not some completely new thing that we're asking for. It's something that's visibly working on our doorstep, and the technology is making it easier and easier. I mean, the technical barriers to trade between Canada and the US or between Australia and New Zealand are now absolutely minimal, and are getting less almost by the week as technology advances. And the day is not far off when all of this is done by blockchain, and customs posts throughout the developed world become basically redundant.
Ian Dunt has an air bubble above his head that says, "I'm glad you mentioned Norway." I don't know why I think that, Ian, but what is the
I quite like Norway.
What is the argument against what Daniel Hannan has just said? I mean, that the Norwegian model in terms of trade appears to work rather well.
No, I rather fancy the Norwegian model, and let's talk very closely about what the Norwegian model actually involves, because this is considered absolutely, Daniel, actually, you said before that our politics could be further apart. Actually, Daniel's been pretty sound on this. It was only, he used to say there was no way we'd ever leave the single market. Norway is in the single market. That is now considered, most Brexiters will say that is not real Brexit, that suddenly Theresa May is not willing to countenance it for the last 18 months or so. That's treated like some kind of great Remainer plot doing a Norway. Actually, I think Norway would be a pretty sensible, pragmatic compromise. And by that I mean, basically, no one would be happy.
I'm actually going to be even more wonkish than you there on this. It's Switzerland that I want rather than Norway.
Yes, fair. No, I know you rather like the Swiss model, and that's fair enough. I think it's a little bit contorted, the Swiss model. It's basically a series of bilateral agreements. We really are going to send everyone to sleep if we go down that road. Let's talk about what's good about Norway. Norway is in the single market. Now, basically, what all of this stuff comes down to is equivalency. And equivalency, again, is another boring word. What that really means is that they can look at the EU and go, you are producing your products to the same standards as us. And for that reason, we're not going to apply very strict checks on the things as they come across the border. So that could be anything. It could be about the levels of, recyclable material that you use in packaging. It could be the way that a car's electrical systems interfere with pacemakers. Basically, things are produced at the same standards so they can flow in a frictionless way. The way the single market really works is that you're trying to get various national economies and meld them together so that they can trade basically as if they're in the same country. So Norway is obviously much, much closer to the way that we do things in Europe than most of the models that are being proposed, certainly the stuff that's being proposed by the government, which is a million miles away from this kind of idea. Those guys have arrangements that mean that they can get stuff over borders with relative ease. I mean, but even then, let's be clear about deficiencies in that model. I mean, they struggle with the fact that their goods have to go. There's something called country of origin checks, basically extremely laborious bureaucratic requirements that mean you have to demonstrate the origin of every single component part of your product, something which is not easy to do, and especially difficult for countries like Britain, where most of our, I think it's 25% of the component parts of our exports come from overseas themselves. That's a lot of work for a company to do. So there's still a defect there, but that does actually seem like a pretty good place for us to be, and it's, of course, considered some kind of Remainer treason by most of the people in the government.
Daniel Hannan, why are we not hearing David Davis, Theresa May talk about Norway, the model, in the way that you described it? We're not hearing that from the chief negotiators from our end. Why not?
We're not going to precisely copy Norway or precisely copy Guernsey or precisely copy any other non-EU country. There are, I think, 43 countries in the Council of Europe, of which 19 are outside the European Union, right? So there's lots of different countries out there that have free trade with the EU without being part of it, from Turkey and Macedonia right through to Iceland and the Faroe Islands. No two have an identical deal. So in a way, it's kind of silly to say, is Britain going to exactly copy Norway, or is it exactly going to copy, Switzerland or whoever? But the broad principle of being, outside the customs union, but having economic arrangements that are compatible with the single market, that give us, in other words, sufficient equivalence to avoid the sort of the regulatory divergence that would create barriers. I think that's kind of almost the inevitable outcome. To be honest, if you think about the result, it was 52-48, right? It wasn't a massive vote to leave. I don't see how you could fairly interpret a 52-48 result as an instruction to walk away and just have a kind of distant, friendly relationship with the EU in the way that, South Korea or somewhere does. Plainly, it seems to me, a vote that's that close is a vote for a gradual phased recovery of some powers, but that will be a process, not an event. The day after Brexit is going to look very like the day before, but that's the day we can begin to diverge.
See, this is really sensible, good stuff. And all I wish is that there were more liberal leavers like Daniel, and including Daniel, who were making these arguments. In the
So
18
should Daniel be
months
part of the
afterwards.
negotiating team then?
Well, no, what I would want is that people that have currency and credibility with Brexiters, like him, were actually making these points. Instead, what we saw was for 18 months, everyone disappeared. We got this completely bizarre, deeply unrealistic approach towards it. None of the Brexiters that helped deliver that campaign just all ran away, leaving David Davis, who, you know, fair credit to him, he's a lot smarter than Liam Fox, he's a lot smarter than Boris Johnson, neither of which is saying very much. But it's still not really capable of delivering on the magnitude of the task in front of him. So look, everything Daniel said is right. I just wish that he had bothered to be saying it over the last 18 months.
Let's just... very quickly, Daniel.
As Ian knows, I've written a book setting out how it works called What Next? How to Get the Best from Brexit, which sets out in detail how what I've just said would happen at a sort of technical level. And I'm blogging and writing it every week.
I want to just get a question in very quickly, if we can. Mark in Broadstairs, what would you like to say, Mark? Good evening.
Evening, guys. My question is about customs once we leave the EU. Now, a lot of Brexiters out there talking about no deal is better than a bad deal. Now, I was listening to a guy yesterday who runs the Port of Dover, and he said at the moment it takes 2 minutes to check a vehicle under EU regulations which comes through, the trucks, etc., and that will double to 4 minutes. Now, with 10,000 trucks going through there a day, surely there's going to be a massive consequence on supply lines, etc., in the country. I just wonder what your views were.
Daniel Hannan, I mean, that's just another example, isn't it, of the kind of additional bureaucracy that we will experience in leaving. By definition, it can't be any other way.
Well, I don't think that is a likely outcome. I think that it will almost certainly be the case that we have arrangements that allow the continued facilitation of customs clearance. I mean, again, think of Switzerland. It's outside the customs union. It's completely surrounded by the EU, right? There are over 1 million EU nationals who cross the Swiss border to work every day, right? That border is not an obstacle. It's also on the main sort of haulage routes. So lorries moving from Germany to Italy or from France to Austria have to cross Switzerland twice, and they do it without blinking. Now, Britain, which is an island, which has ports, has a limited number of points of entry. Are we really saying that we couldn't manage, if little Switzerland, with its jagged and impenetrable border, part of it at altitude, manages to have a deal with the EU which allows it to export 5 times as much per head as we do to the EU from the outside? Are we really saying that we wouldn't be capable of managing it technically? I mean, I just think there's so much unnecessary pessimism here. There's people who have almost talked themselves into wanting the whole thing to fail so they can only see downsides.
Come on, Ian Dunt, stop being pessimistic. That's what's happening here.
Argument.
But it's not a law of physics, is it, that it has to be this bureaucratic? It could change. Why can it not change? Technology, 21st century.
Okay, so I mean, look, we're not the ones that have been saying no deal is better than a bad deal. That's the point where you are staring into the abyss. People call it a cliff edge. It's not a cliff edge. It would be the most humiliating moment for this country since Suez. It would be one of the most economically damaging moments of this. I mean, certainly, hard to think of anything after the Second World War that would be more economically damaging to us than a no deal outcome. And yet we are still, no matter, I sense, I'm afraid, quite a lot of complacency from Mr. Hannan on this. We are still going on that conveyor belt towards no deal. And the reason for that is because we haven't come up with a realistic program. Now, when people do this, very briefly, they sort of say, well, why don't you have more faith in the country? It's because you have faith in Britain that you concern yourself and you deal with this stuff rationally and calmly and patiently so that you make sure the welfare of people in this country is protected. I do not see that coming from the government. I see them just pushing and pushing and pushing to an unrealistic timetable, and that's where that no deal stuff comes into play.
We'll come to that no deal point a little more in just a second. Thank you to Mark in Broadstairs for raising that. Our lines remain open, 03456 6060 973. We have the editor of politics.co.uk, Ian Dunt, with us, Daniel Hannan, MEP. It's Remain, it's Leave, it's the arguments for and against, etc. And, of course, importantly, your calls. We'll come to some texts, emails, tweets as well. Still to come this evening.
When 9/11 happened, I was actually happy about it. I kind of celebrated it because I was a committed Islamist.
That is Dr. Hussama Hussain, head of Islamic Studies at the Quilliam Foundation. He spent 20 years as a committed radical Islamist, even fighting jihad in Afghanistan. He's with us live in the next hour, taking your calls, particularly on that issue of radicalisation. This is all part and parcel, of course, of our Islam and the West West features over the course of this week. Right now it's 10:30 and we get the latest news headlines from Paul Smith.
Theresa May has hinted at more pay rises for public sector workers after saying the issue would be looked at before November's budget. But some police officers in England and Wales are accusing her of lying after she claimed their pay has risen above inflation since 2010. A 40-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of attempted burglary at Prince George's School. Security is now being reviewed at Thomas's Battersea in South London. The President of the European Commission insists the UK will soon regret its decision to leave the EU. Jean-Claude Juncker also says there'll be a major European meeting the day after Brexit in 2019 to consider the Union's future. LBC weather, showers and blustery conditions for most tonight, turning drier and clearer over Scotland and Northern Ireland, a low of 9 degrees.
This is LBC.
Come to Galliard Homes for brand new London apartments from £225,000 with estimated yields of up to 5.8%. Westgate House is superbly located, just a 6-minute walk to the Tube, that has you in the West End in 21 minutes, which is roughly the same time it will take you to drive to Heathrow. There are exclusive on-site facilities, such as a private health club, screening room and 24-hour concierge. To buy in London from £225,000, come to Westgate House, Westgate, London W5 1YY, from 5 p.m. on Friday the 15th until 5 p.m. on Sunday the 17th of September. Call 0203 770 6300 or visit galliardhomes.com. That's galliardhomes.com.
Those pesky leaves have fallen again. No bother. Get home to our succulent southern fried chicken meal for two with crispy potatoes and salad for only £6. Give yourself something to look forward to this autumn evening with our delicious meals for two. Choose from any mouth-watering main and 2 tasty sides. Another great value meal deal for you from the Co-op. Subject to availability. See participating stores for details. Meal deal includes 1 main and 2 sides for £6.
Fletcher Day is no ordinary law firm. Finding creative and long-lasting solutions to the legal problems faced by our clients is what we do best. With offices in central London, our team of experienced solicitors take the time to understand your needs. If you're looking for bright and creative lawyers to help you maximise business opportunities or solve complex legal problems, contact Fletcher Day Solicitors at fletcherday.co.uk. Fletcher Day, passionate about law.
The Renault scrappage scheme is now on. You could save thousands on a brand new Renault. So say au revoir to your old car. Model exclusions apply. Eligibility criteria apply. Visit renault.co.uk/scrappage.
Is your business structured in the correct way to manage your exposure to income tax, capital gains tax and inheritance tax? Does your business structure assist you in achieving your goals? Or do you feel like you suffer a tax charge every time you want to do something new? Let Barnes Rofe look at your business structure and see if we can help you with these issues. Visit barnesrofe.com. Barnes Rofe, clever accountants for business.
Ian Collins on LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation, we have the journalist Ian Dunt, the MEP Daniel Hannan with us. Let's just, before we go to a call, we'll talk to Jamie in Chester on this point in just a moment. Daniel Hannan, Jean-Claude Juncker, how do you get on with him, by the way? What's your own relationship with him?
I don't have a very high opinion of him. And in a way, I think the moment that Brexit became inevitable was when he was reappointed. It was like saying, OK, we're not taking on board any of the kind of anti-federalist ideas. We're going back to this guy who believes in a European army, European tax system, and all the rest of it. And and he's just confirmed it all today. The idea that if we stayed in, it would have all stayed the same. I mean, it's now very clear that the EU is heading off towards statehood.
His annual address, I didn't realise it was actually referred to as that, but his annual presidential speech, within that, as you rightly say, he talked about closer ties, but he also said the UK will soon regret leaving the EU. I suppose you'd expect him to say nothing else, Daniel, but what do you make of those comments?
Obviously he's wrong, and the majority of people will continue to think that. I mean, there's been, if anything, a slight swing to leave, and with reason, because the the terrors of the earth that were threatened during the campaign, that the stock exchange would collapse and that unemployment would rise and that there'd be a recession in 2016 and all the rest of it because we'd voted, all of that has not come about. And I just think it's a bit funny, really, that the people who told us during and then even after the no vote that there would be this kind of immediate economic meltdown, when it didn't arise, rather than displaying any kind of modesty or saying, okay, maybe I got that wrong, maybe I should go and reconsider some of my assumptions, they're behaving like doomsday cultists. You know, the apocalypse doesn't come, so they just defer the date and say, oh, just you wait. And, you know, you just wonder, is there any situation where they wouldn't be saying it's all about to blow up?
Well, are you a doomsday cultist, first of all, Ian?
No, man, I'm someone that looked at the inflation figures when they came out yesterday, and what the inflation figures showed is that we have 2.9% inflation, and there's a reason for that. The reason that it's 2.9% inflation is because of the fall in the value of the pound that took place immediately after Brexit. There was another fall when Theresa May came out and did her speech, which Daniel was celebrating, God knows why, because he was saying earlier he approved of the single market, when she said that we're going to leave the single market in the customs union. Now that costs families money. The way that the kind of things that have been rising in price, oil, fuel that you put in your car, clothes, shoes, food. Okay, now this is, especially food, is the stuff that really penalises the poor. Wages, we saw, stats came out today, have not been keeping up with inflation. So that means that everyone in this country is getting poorer every day as a result of Brexit. What I find annoying about this is I would tolerate, you could even make the case, you know what, it's worth it in the end, because we got this other, you know, we're aiming towards something, we're going to try and achieve it. Instead, the plans that they are putting forward for the future literally make trade experts fall about laughing, literally turn us into a laughing stock. That's the amount of actual consideration they have by people whose livelihoods are based on executing these kind of plans. And yet back at home, as people get poorer, people like Mr. Hannan are out there going, oh, look, everything's absolutely fine. There was no economic apocalypse. You know, you've got to take a more adult view of that. You have to be more responsible on that and realise the damage that has been done to the livelihood of low-income families.
Daniel Hannan, if you could answer that. I mean, the point about the falling pound, inflation, I mean, these are irredeemable realities.
Okay, before the referendum, the IMF and the Treasury both agreed that the pound was heavily overvalued because it was an artificial sanctuary. Every time that the Bank of England was trying to massage its value down, there'd be another crisis in Greece or in the Italian banks, and people would flee to sterling. So, in fact, sterling has still not devalued enough, according to what the IMF before the referendum said it should. Look at every other metric. Employment is up, retail sales are up, growth is up, the stock exchange is up, manufacturing output is up, exports are up, and yet every time this happens, people ignore the actual hard data, the empirical data of good news, and say, oh yeah, but here's a survey saying that things may get worse. And after a while, you just start to sound a little bit silly. As far as food goes, by the way, this is really important. It's absolutely true that the price of groceries becomes more important for lower income families. It represents a higher percentage of their monthly budget, right? When we have left the EU and we are free to start buying food at world prices rather than under the Common Agricultural Policy, that will significantly lower food prices, which will benefit everybody in this country, but will especially benefit the people who are worst off, for whom that represents the highest percentage of their weekly budget.
Okay, so, I mean, you say any other metric. I mean, one of those metrics is economic growth, and Britain has currently slumped in its economic growth pretty much to the bottom of the leading industrial nations. That does not seem to me to be an irrelevant metric. That seems a very, very pertinent one indeed. We talk about retail spending. Now, what we are seeing, very, very troubling, it's exactly the same thing that we saw just ahead of 2008, the financial crash, is this growth over and over again of consumer credit, of people getting credit cards, spending on the credit cards, and that's how they're maintaining their spending. Because it's not coming, as we mentioned, through wages. Remember, wages really stagnated in the wake of the financial crisis. Prices rose above. We had this dreadful period for years that we just came out of. We came out of it for about 2 years, people finally starting to earn more than prices were rising. Their wages were rising faster than prices. And then Brexit came, and now we've slumped back again.
So are you saying all the good news is just kind of false news or manufactured news?
It's not really good. I mean,
manufacturing, there was good news there this week.
You look at the core, again, you just look at the core of what's going on in this economy, and it's deeply, deeply troubling. It's not enough to say the pound was overvalued. These are people's lives that we're talking about. It's not some sort of dusty academic text that we're looking at.
More people are in work in this country than have ever been in work before in our history. And by the way,
And by the way, more people from the EU are working here than at any other time before, so they plainly don't think that we're an economic basket case. People are still continuing to move here because they regard it as a strong economy.
And as we saw with the figures, we saw, an almost unprecedented number of Europeans start to leave. We've seen 95% of EU nurses start to decide that they may want to leave. Now, if I can quickly address this point that Daniel mentioned on food prices. The way that we would do that on food prices is to lower, the only way to do it is to lower your tariffs against the rest of the world. These are the taxes on goods coming in here. That basically means, yes, that you would eventually get cheap food. You get food of a very low time, that you actually get sort of the food that's been chemically affected, for instance, in the US, from countries like Thailand and Brazil. But by the way, there is a byproduct if you do that, which he's not mentioning, which is that British food producers face competition that they cannot deal with. Now, this is considered by most experts in terms of agricultural production to be a properly existential threat for these guys. You look at a company like British Sugar, okay? And British Sugar is highly competitive, very successful. It uses beet sugar, does it here in the UK, manufacturing decent jobs, pays about 40 grand in manufacturing jobs, agricultural product, can sell it over to Europe. If we put up tariffs against Europe, which you have to do by WTO, by World Trade Organization rules if you leave the customs union, and as Daniel Hannan is suggesting, you reduce tariffs to the rest of the world, you are going to get flooded by sugar from Brazil and from Thailand. Why those two countries? Because they subsidise their sugar. So what you would find is British manufacturing jobs being eradicated by subsidised industries in other parts of the world. Now, if that seems a sensible way to proceed to you, then I'm very, very startled by it, because it does not seem sensible to me.
Okay, this is just incredible. Ian has gone in about 30 seconds from saying that it's going to be a disaster because food is going to be too expensive to saying it's going to be a disaster because food is going to be too cheap. And this is exactly illustrating, I'm afraid, the mindset that whatever happens, the only consistent thing is he says it's going to be a disaster.
So the thing is that right now where we are is that we have food producers in the UK who can make a living, and we have food prices that are going down by virtue of our single market membership. The new system is food prices rise because of the fall in sterling. The only way to bring them down is to allow cheap foreign goods to flood the market by ruining UK domestic producers. I would suggest that the current system is better than that which is being proposed.
What is the problem with cheap goods? What is the problem with prices falling? It's an incredibly kind of snobbish argument, but prices coming down is incredibly good news.
Well, we already have prices
coming down for basic commodities.
No, we already have prices coming down in food. The thing is that your suggestion...
At world prices instead of EU prices, it will save hundreds of pounds every year for every family, for wealthy and for poor people, but with obviously a disproportionate impact for low-income families. And that will mean that they'll have a lot more money to spend on other things, which will stimulate the whole economy. So it doesn't just mean that groceries
Ian Dunt, just to respond.
Well, just out of interest, I'm just wondering if you do accept then that, UK agricultural producers would be put out of business by you flooding the market with cheap food from overseas. Just on that specific point, do you say that is the case?
So on that specific, every time this has happened before, it happened in New Zealand in the 80s, it's happening in Australia more recently, people make that argument that it's going to wipe out our farmers, and do you know what happens? Farmers diversify into other things, and no one, you speak to any Kiwi farmer now, I've not come across any New Zealand farmer who wants to go back to the old system of tariffs, because although they were scared of it before it came, they are all happy with how it's working now.
All right, Daniel Hannan, stay with us. Ian Dunt, stay with us. We will talk to Jamie. Are you there, Jamie, by the way?
I am, yeah.
Jamie, stay where you are, sir. I know you've been hanging on, but we got into other territory there as well. Such is the nature, the labyrinthine nature of the Brexit debate. We'll talk to Jamie in Chester and get his question. Loads of emails and texts and tweets, all manner of points that have come up, of course, on this. Ian Dunt, Daniel Hannan with us. You're listening to Late Nights with Ian Collins, LBC.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Public sector pay cap has been relaxed, but only in two specific areas, police officers and prison officers as well. David Lidington, who is Lord Chancellor.
There will be another round of independent public sector pay review body reports.
Very difficult to say no to them now,
what the government will be doing is sitting down and working out service by service that what is our judgment about the right balance in this service between what we need for recruitment and retention and a good quality service to the public.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With Hampton by Hilton. Book direct for the lowest price.
Every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
Enhance your lifestyle with unique kitchen and bathroom designs from Alaris. Whether you want technically advanced German kitchens from ProNorm or classic quality kitchens from Mearway, Alaris has what you're looking for. Or enjoy your dream bathroom with Alaris Bathroom Designs. For free design and competitive prices, visit Alaris at Crossways, Dartford or alariskitchens.co.uk.
Transform your home with Alaris. Happiness starts with a smile.
As one of the UK's leading dental travel clinics, Vital Europe have offered cost-effective dental solutions to over 30,000 patients for the last 10 years. After an initial consultation, our clinics in London and Budapest use dental implants to give you a smile in just one day before a further final treatment. With finance packages and a treatment guarantee, take a positive step to a healthier looking smile with vitaleurope.co.uk.
You could go out tonight, or stay in and watch the latest movies in Sky Store, direct from the cinema to your TV. So get your excuses ready.
We're going to have to cancel. Ben's stuck at the office.
We're watching Guardians of the Galaxy 2 or Wonder Woman.
Ben!
Watch the latest movies in Sky Store now and get a $5.99 Sky Store voucher when you collect 4 Nestle sharing bags. UK and Republic of Ireland 18 plus. Latest movies $13.99. Closes September 30th, 2018. Promotion and Sky Store terms apply.
Is your business structured in the correct way to manage your exposure to income tax, capital gains tax and inheritance tax? Does your business structure assist you in achieving your goals? Or do you feel like you suffer a tax charge every time you want to do something new? Let Barnes Rofe look at your business structure and see if we can help you with these issues. Visit barnesrofe.com. Barnes Rofe, clever accountants for business.
To some people, this could sound like a washing machine. But to a British Gas customer, it's the sound of a thank you. That's because we're thanking all of our customers with British Gas rewards, including things like free energy with loyalty days and many more. Join today. Offer subject to availability, conditions apply.
Maths homework, romantic breaks, holiday checklists, boarding passes and the local lingo, song lyrics, singing coaches and much needed vocal cord exercises, fairy cake recipes, DIY witches hats, Easter egg hunts and spa breaks, forgotten theatre tickets, train timetables, birthday invites, party bags and top tips for avoiding sugar rushes.
Whatever your family is printing, with up to 3 years worth of ink included with selected models of the Epson EcoTank printer, it means you can just keep on going. 3 years worth of ink is based on an average print volume of 140 pages per month.
Late Nights with Ian Collins on LBC.
Right, let's get some questions to our guests. So one rule in this section for our guests, nice succinct answers, gents. No monologues allowed, no dominating the territory in the name of your own belief system. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course. Let's go to Jamie in Chester. Jamie, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Ian.
You've got a question. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hopefully this one will lend itself to a pretty quick answer. There's been a lot of debate so far on effects that might come into play when we leave, whether good or bad. There's one area that I think everyone, or at least most people, can agree is causing real damage now, and that's EU citizens' rights. Because the uncertainty, just not knowing what's going to happen, is causing real anxiety and problems. I don't agree with Daniel's assessment about what EU citizens think about this current situation at all. But putting aside the figures, it's causing real anxiety and problems with not only EU citizens but people who are married to them like me.
And it's a fair question. We've done, and you may be aware, Jamie, I don't know how many debates on exactly this point. Daniel Hannan, let me put that to you first of all. You know, somebody has royally messed up here, hasn't there? Because there's many, many people's lives that right now are in utter limbo. No other way of putting it.
The government has made really clear that your right to reside here and the associated rights to welfare, to healthcare, to work will not be affected. If you are already here as an EU national, then nothing is going to change. The only thing that is going to change is that you will cease to be, as it were, an EU citizen within the EU, and therefore you won't have the right to vote at local elections. Other than that, nothing's going to change.
Let me make clear that that is false. So EU nationals have the right to have a foreign spouse with them. You have the right to live with your wife, with your husband. That is a core right that you have. British citizens don't have that right. If you earn less than £18,600, which an awful lot of people in this country do, you do not have the right to have them live with you. So an EU national here, who is married to someone from America, from Canada, from Somalia, from wherever, actually will lose the right to be with their husband or wife if they earn less than £18,600. There are many other ways that EU nationals have lost their rights while being here, and there's a more pernicious, broader way that they've emotionally been made to feel unwelcome in a country that they had started to call home. But just as one point of factual truth, they do not retain all the same rights, and that is an example.
Jamie?
Ian's right on that point. It's something I've researched extensively. The main problem is with a lot of people who essentially stay-at-home mums mostly, but stay-at-home parents where the British citizen's the one earning the money. They are the ones who look like they may well lose their rights. And I mean, I appreciate what Daniel's saying, that we've been given assurances. They mean very little when you have people like Liam Fox saying that people are still major cards to play or bargaining chips, because the only way that can be right is if he's willing to actually sacrifice those rights. I don't think he is, but until we know, it's causing real problems.
But I'm sorry to say this, but the anxiety is not being stoked by people like me. It's being stoked, as you just heard, by people like Ian saying, "Oh no, it's all going to be awful."
No, it's not. I know it's not by people like you, Daniel. That is true, because you're more moderate on the Brexit side. But it's not people like Ian either, because what he's saying is right. It's the politicians, which this ultimately comes back to, that this issue needs to be sorted. And when Liam Fox...
It is going to be sorted.
Well, yes, but we don't know what the outcome is going to be. It's the uncertainty that's causing problems, not the potential outcome. It's not knowing.
I mean, look, we've seen it over and over. Last week, 100 EU citizens were sent letters by the Home Office saying, "Get out now, or we are going to detain you, and then we're going to deport you." Before, last year, we saw several EU citizens being sent these letters. Now, there was no basic system upon which that should be happening, but the Home Office, for decades now, has been one of the most grotesquely incompetent, inhumane, appallingly bureaucratic and inept departments in this country. And that's saying a lot, because most government departments in this country are staggeringly terrible. Now it is filling the lives of many EU citizens with fear. These are couples who have to lay in bed at night and have conversations about whether they can make it work, who have to look at letters, many of them who aren't that well connected, might not even be that well educated, might not be able to afford a lawyer, and have these scary letters come in from the Home Office. So for us to be so complacent, say, look, it's all fine, everything's going to be okay, I'm sorry, just doesn't tally with the experience,
that is not a Brexit
as has been demonstrated by several EU citizens who have come out over and over again and said that it's an untenable state of affairs for them to have to put up with.
Daniel, you're saying it's not a Brexit issue?
Ian is correct that there is a sort of technical ineptness in some of our government bureaucracies, including in the Home Office. I can't disagree with that. I'm afraid that is intrinsic in government trying to do too many things. But this is not a Brexit issue. I'm afraid that is, although it is, of course, it's appalling when somebody gets a falsely addressed letter, just like it's appalling if you get, something from your bank saying you owe them money or whatever. But it's not because of Brexit. That's not a new thing.
Okay. Can I just go back on that one specific point? I mean, Daniel said earlier that EU citizens weren't going to lose any rights. It's true, isn't it? Do you agree that after March 2019, if you're an EU citizen in the UK, you earn less than £18,600 and you're married to someone from outside the EU, that you do lose the right to keep them with you in the UK? Is that true or false?
I think it's the case that you will no longer be able to bring someone over in that category. In other words, you'll be in the same category as a UK national. You'll have exactly the same rights.
But even by virtue of that, then you accept that EU citizens will have lost at least one right. Let's just get you on file just for that one central point.
In that one thing, they will have the same rights
as
UK
good, that's good. We're
now,
getting
rather than a different one.
This comes from Roy, who says, please ask Ian Dunt what is so great about the EU. Ask Greece, ask Italy. The EU is now talking about all EU countries having the euro. Would that be a good thing?
Yeah, there's some real problems. I mean, I'm not actually a fan of the Eurozone. I think the Eurozone's a terrible idea. And in fact, the way that we set up the Euro was the same kind of weird, emotional sort of sense of historical preordination that the Brexiters are behaving now, and this kind of bizarre idea that growth was going to keep on growing. I am concerned, by the way, you look at Italy. There could be a problem there, and Italy is it's bigger than Greece, There are dangers there. It would be foolish for us to say otherwise. What we do see, however, is that Britain, since it joined the single market in the 70s, where it was the sick man of Europe, has performed in a far superior way to the way it performed beforehand, because we are sharing goods, we're sharing services, we're sharing people. And when you team up in that way with the protections that we do have by our EU membership, we're not part of the Eurozone, then actually you tend to do better for everyone. So is it a question of the EU is so fantastic? Absolutely it is not. It is just far, far better than the categoric, the spectacular ineptitude of British ministers.
Let's get a question in from Rosalind in Highgate, who I think wants to put something to Daniel Hannan. Rosalind, good evening.
Oh, good evening. Yes, this is a question for Daniel Hannan. This is about covering the gap between what the UK is saying it wants on the three major issues it's got to decide by October 19th. for example, Northern Ireland, the situation with the border there, the rights of EU citizens, which you've just discussed, and 3, the divorce bill. It seems to me that looking at that, we are on target to absolutely missing our deadline. There's not going to be a free trade agreement discussion on October 19th.
Yeah, can these things, Daniel Hannan, I mean, you talked about it going rather well, but, I mean, these are huge points of negotiation, and there's 3.5 weeks to sort it out.
Yeah, it may well be the case that they're not decided by October the 19th. I mean, the one that's really problematic is the money. I think on the other two, you can already see the outlines of a deal. The idea of reciprocal respect for the rights of accumulated to people who've already moved, that's pretty much been agreed. And by the way, I think that even the status of new migrants going forward is not going to be just like that of a third country national. I think there'll be some expectation that you are allowed to take up a job offer or take up a place to study. On Northern Ireland, the two sides are closest. The money is what we're arguing about, and of course the money is going to be what we argue about. And the EU will come up with a high figure and we'll come up with a low figure, and in the end it'll be somewhere in between.
Okay, Daniel, thank you. Rosalind, thank you for that. Just a couple of very final quick points. This comes from Joe, who says both of your guests are very bad boys. They've previously led very different lives and opinions. Ian Dunt, did you not used to be for leaving the EU?
No, I would actually still consider myself a Eurosceptic, like I was saying earlier. The EU is not perfect. It's it potentially has some really quite bleak aspects to it. I'm concerned about the Commission. The Commission is an issue. I think the way that Mr. Hannan characterised it is way too extreme. I mean, you've got the Parliament there, it's directly elected MEPs. He's one of them. You've got the Council that's, made up of ministers and prime ministers that are indirectly elected. Look, the EU is a problem, and I consider myself a Eurosceptic. I'm not some naive Europhile. What I do think is the EU is far superior than the Brexit ministers that we've been presented with here, throwing all their toys out the pram.
And Daniel Hannan, you stand accused of being pro-single market. You said it time and time again. What happened to you in your conversion?
Yeah, I mean, as if you were listening to the programme, you'll have heard me say that I want something along the lines of what the Swiss have. The Swiss are outside the jurisdiction of the Court and Commission, but they replicate all of the single market essentials, particularly the bar on discriminating on grounds of nationality, and I still think that's the likeliest outcome.
Daniel Hannan, MEP, thank you, sir, for being with us. Ian Dunt, editor of politics.co.uk, thank you. Thank you to all of our calls. We didn't get around to, there were hundreds of texts and emails. I apologise, I just couldn't get round to reading them all out, but certainly this is not a debate, as you might have gathered, that finishes there. You've got another few years of this stuff, so I'm sure Daniel and Ian will be back with us at some point here on LBC. Coming up in the next section, we continue our set of special features on Islam and the West. This evening, former Islamist extremist Usama Hassan joins me to talk radicalisation. All of that coming next on LBC.
On FM, online, on your mobile and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 11 o'clock, Theresa May will announce further details of her vision for Britain's future outside the EU in Florence next week. The Prime Minister's high profile